What's something you thought was common knowledge but found out most people didn't know? Story 1. The Golden Rule. Give zero information to the cops. Give everything to the medics, even if it's embarrassing. Sometimes that's the difference between going to prison and staying alive. It's a shame they don't. The scariest thing, imagine drinking only milk from a carton for 24 years, which can be stored for 6 months. Algorithms don't criticize, praise. For some, this is a brilliant revelation from a book, while for others, it is natural behavior. It is interesting that the simplest human kindness sometimes requires an entire... There used to be heat rises. It would seem that what could be simpler? But when you encounter a complete lack of understanding of such basics, you realize how fragile and... Answer. As we're getting older too, and younger people start dipping their toes into niche interests, they're now also learning those things we took for granted. Whenever a new form of media starts gaining steam, we get that stuff we considered common knowledge retold. For example, learning that pressing a start after a game over in Super Mario Bros. Would take you back to the first level of the world you died on was probably in a magazine in the 80s, early 90s. I saw it online in the late 90s for the first time myself. Then YT vids mentioning it and other cheats in the 2000s, early 2010s. Now with short-form vids, it's been on TikTok. We'll think everyone knows it, but there's bound to be someone seeing it for the first time. Story 5. Some eggs aren't fertilized and will never become a baby chicken penguin. It baffles me how many folks I've had to explain that to this month alone. Answer. Same with humans. Our very large extended family is genetically disposed to a child cancer, but we also have weirdly high rates of surviving it. Years ago, an oncologist approached us saying, for those of us done having kids, would we be willing to donate our eggs for a stem cell research project to see if they could grow stem cells from an unfertilized egg? We got confirmation the intent was not to fertilize the eggs and then do stem cells, just the eggs on their own. Yet many people we tell accuse the women of being either abortionists or murderers. They don't understand we shed these eggs every 28 days. So here's a chance to maybe save your future kids from this disease. All the screamers did was convince a few of the women who were strong, no abortion types to change their views BC. They saw firsthand how the debate is occupied by people who don't understand middle school level, basic health class science. An egg is not a chicken pause, and a human egg is not a human being. It seems like basic biology. But how much passion and accusations of murder arise from a misunderstanding of this simple fact? It's sad and funny at the same time. Story 6. Being nice and patient will give you a bigger chance of getting a refund or a new of whatever is broken than being angry and blaming the random worker. Answer. I still remember the one time my evening flight got canceled. The desk agent not only rescheduled my flight with an upgrade, but she got a hotel reservation for me at the airline discount because I was apparently the only person who didn't blow up at her. I'm never nice because I'm angling for anything. I'm nice because I was raised to be polite and respectful. On top of that, I know that the people I'm dealing with aren't the problem. And they're people. That being said, sometimes being nice comes with rewards. Never expected, but always appreciated. Story 7. Some people confuse the concepts of checking your oil level with changing your oil periodically. Both activities need to be done regularly, as in, why would I need to change the oil? The light hasn't come on yet. Story 8. Everything takes longer than you expect it to. If you think a task should take you an hour, allot yourself 90 minutes. Saves you a lot of stress and keeps you from chronically running late like most people seem to do. Story 9. If interrogated by the police for a crime, ask for a lawyer and say nothing. You can be incredibly guilty, but without your testimony, you have a chance to get off. You have rights. Story 10. Mayonnaise does not have any dairy in it. Just because eggs are sold in the dairy section of the grocery store does not mean eggs are dairy products. They will not trigger your lactose intolerance because they have no lactose in them. Story 11. Police are allowed to lie to you, manipulate you, and twist your words during interrogations. Most people assume there's some kind of rule in place, but once you waive your right to an attorney and agree to talk, they can basically do whatever they want short of a threat. Innocent or not, always lawyer up immediately. Answer, I learned this in middle school when apparently the local undercover cop manipulated the friendless autistic child by befriending him, then withdrawing G's his friendship, then telling G, the kid the only say to be his friend was to get him some cannabis. Then when he did get the cannabis, he arrested the kid. I think the parents sued, It was a huge bug thing. Then I remember the following few years when I entered high school, it was like a cannabis free-for-all, lol. No cop wanted to get you in trouble for cannabis. I got pulled over once for smoking while driving when I was 17, and the cop just went, "Oh, just toss it out the window, I guess, and be on your way, lol." It was really fudge up though, honestly. Like, I remember he tried a few times, once buying literal herbs, and the cop was like, "No, try again," and even pointed him in the direction of where to buy the real stuff. I'm definitely going to look up what news station covered this because I remember my parents seeing it on the news, and we talked about how to tell when someone is taking advantage of you, etc. Edited to add, apparently it was part of a big operation and 22 students were a part of it, but the autistic student parents fought back to say this wasn't ethical. So his personal story outshines the other 21, I guess, since I only remember learning about him as a kid. But this is more important than it seems. We grew up watching TV shows where the kind detective says, confess and we'll help you. But in reality, it's remain silent and demand a lawyer. The first time you realize this, you feel your childhood view of the world crumble. Story 12. That the hole in the ozone and the greenhouse effect are caused by entirely separate processes and do not interact with the other. Story 13. 95 of getting what you want is in how you ask. Don't be a male body part Karen, and you will likely get whatever you need. Answer. My mother-in-law handled the finances in their house until she no longer could. She used the same tax accountant for like 20 years. The first year, my father-in-law had to take over because she was no longer mentally capable to handle it. The tax accountant called my wife and said, "I'm sorry to have to be the one to bring this to you, but your father is never allowed in my office again, and we will never be doing his taxes again." He apparently went in and just berated the staff. This is common, and he can't figure out why he can't get anything done. Story 14. Tell the cops nothing. Tell nurses and EMTs everything, even if it's illegal. They don't care what substances you've done. They care about not eliminate you with anesthetics. They need to know if you're incoherent because you're high tipsy or if you're brain damaged. They need to know if you took something and how much so they don't eliminate you with a weird medication interaction. And they need to know if you're going to end up in withdrawal during your stay so they can treat you appropriately. As a chronically ill person, I 100 support lying in the ER to get doctors to believe you, but do not lie about substances. That includes plant substance, nicotine, adult beverage, and hallucinogens. Minors, they're going to do a substances panel if they think something's up, and none of you are as good at lying as you think you are. They will probably tell your parents, but that beats dying of something horrid, painful, and preventable. If you will be in genuine danger when your parents find out, tell your nurse, doctor, EMT that ASAP. As soon as you enter the ER, continuing your life with minimal side effects is your only priority. Everything else can be unfucked later. The golden rule: give zero information to the cops, give everything to the medics, even if it's embarrassing. Sometimes that's the difference between going to prison and staying alive. It's a shame they don't teach this in school in the very first life safety class. Story 15. That Washington, D.C. is not a state, and it is not a city in Maryland or Virginia. When I told a friend I was moving there, she asked me what state it was in. She was teacher, so I was flabbergasted. She didn't know. A teenage cashier at a store 20 miles from D.C. looked at my D.C. ID and was shocked to learn D.C. had its own driver's license. Story 16. Just because something is being talked about in mainstream news doesn't actually mean it's important. Likewise, just because something isn't being talked about in mainstream news doesn't mean it's not important. For examples of this, the news likes to talk an awful lot about pointless topics like Donald Trump's weirdly shaped jerk when he played tennis that one time, or Joe Biden liking ice cream. These stories are not news. Meanwhile, there are very serious topics which get very little or no coverage at all, and when they do get covered, are often purposefully misrepresented. Mainstream news outlets are primarily just mouthpieces for propaganda. One more. Much of this content that makes the rounds in social media isn't actually organic. There are companies out there paying for likes, upvotes, and shares. Take Reddit, for example. It's a well-known fact that many of the users on this website are bots. But most of us just upvote their reposts every single day, boosting their karma ranking, and then ignore the consequences of that. There's a lot of ideas which get exchanged on social media today, which are not actually popular ideas, but they're getting thrown around and boosted because powerful players want the masses to either adopt those mindsets or believe information which may or may not be true. For whatever means, who knows? You are not immune to propaganda. In fact, you help spread it. If you start investigating the profiles of different users you come across, it's very easy to spot bots or paid trolls. I understand that I sound like a conspiracy theorist for sharing this information. The scariest thing about propaganda is when you don't notice that you yourself are becoming part of it. You think it's public opinion, but it's just a narrative that has been successfully launched on the internet. Realizing this causes a slight, or not so slight, crisis of confidence in everything you read. Answer. Another favorite is the lazy bloggers, aggregators who write an article saying that everyone is having a certain reaction to an event or situation. They back it up with half a dozen tweets, which obviously is a small sample size. However, if you look up the people who posted those tweets, you will find that it's not some homemaker from Middle America posting. It's usually an activist or someone trying to make a name for themselves in the media. Story 17. If you want to drink beer all night long, drink a glass of water between each beer. You will be the last one standing. Story 18. In the U.S., a lot of hospital systems have financial aid based on income. I've gotten 60 to 100 of my bill wiped after insurance. Even while making a living wage, they still took off 60. Answer. Some states actually have laws requiring them to do this. It's often called charity care, which is a bit of a misnomer, and I think puts a lot of people off from asking about even when they should qualify. Think of it this way. Hospitals get big tax breaks, and part of the deal comes with certain expectations about helping their communities. It's not charity, it's hospitals holding up their end of the bargain. I'm glad to hear your hospital did this without a fight. Not all of them do. Story 19. That you should wash your hands every time you use the toilet. Yes, even if you got nothing on them? Answer. God, one time I joked about guys not washing their hands, and a friend who was training to work in elderly care, mind you, just looked at me all confused. It's not like I pee over my hands, he said. The entire group we were with took turns pointing out to him that even if he has the cleanest male body part on planet Earth, the guy who touched the door handle before him probably doesn't. It just wouldn't get into his brain. Story 20. The arrow next to your gas pump symbol on your dashboard indicates what side of the car your tank is on. Story 21. That not everything you see on the news, in movies, or on TV is true. I'm pretty sure I figured that out as a kid, but Reddit has shown me that some people don't gain common sense with age. Story 22. If you flick the bar sticking out of your steering wheel up, it causes the lights on the right side of your vehicle to flash. And if you flick it down, the left side flashes, so people know you are going to make a turn or change lanes. It even works in pickup trucks. Story 23. Washing your hands after the bathroom before eating. You can't eat at everyone's house, y'all, and don't eat unless you watch the cooking process. It's my first night working at a nursing home, and this girl training me just pulled a resident's pants down, sat her on the toilet, came to the kitchen, grabbed pretzels, ate them, went back, put the pants back up on the lady, came back out, ate more pretzels, then fixed the lady a toast. UTF never once washed her hands. Story 24. If you go under a tunnel in the States, if there is a red line along the wall, it means you're underground. And if it's blue, you're underwater. Story 25. Planning for expected things. Baby's gonna spit up, often misses the burp cloth. Maybe tucking a spare t-shirt for mom in the bag might be a good idea. You would think I'd cured cancer or something. Small boys find mud. Keeping wipes and clean clothes in a bag in the car isn't discovering a new species. It's just sensible planning for what probably will happen. And yes, this is why my purse is big enough for a pad and an extra pair of underwear in a plastic bag. Because my uterus is a vindictive meanie and likes to surprise me. But the number of people who act like doing this is an absolutely amazing act of foresight well, it makes me worry for the future of the species. Answer. My dad had no knowledge of babies when my brother and I were born. When my brother first spit up, my dad assumed he'd messed up feeding him somehow and called a pediatrician to get advice on what he was doing wrong. Not only did this dude not have a spare shirt on hand, he straight up brought my brother to a second pediatrician for a second opinion. It was part of why my mom decided not to let him do solo runs at parenting until she'd had several conversations with him about how babies actually worked. Story 26. That the U.S. has 50 states. I live in Europe, and a huge percent of people are convinced it has 52. My only reason I can think of is that they consider the contiguous states to be 50, then add Hawaii and Alaska to come up with 52. It would be understandable if most people didn't know how many states are in the U.S., but for it to consistently be thought of as 52 is strange to me. Story 27. Not most people didn't know, but my best friend didn't know there was fresh milk and long shelf life milk. Don't know if it's a thing in the U.S. Basically, fresh milk is good for 3 weeks and needs to be refrigerated at all times. Long shelf life milk is good for 6 months and does not need to be refrigerated unless opened. We went grocery shopping once and she bought 6 fresh milks, 1-liter bottles. When I asked why, she said she drinks a lot of milk. A few weeks later, she told me they all went bad and spoiled, even though they weren't expired. I asked a few more questions, and after she revealed that she put them in the pantry like she always did, it dawned on me that she had no idea. And so I told her about how there's different kinds of milk. She was flabbergasted. That was the first time she's heard this. And apparently went 24 years of her life only drinking long shelf life milk, EW. I still tease her about it. Imagine drinking only milk from a carton for 24 years, which can be stored for 6 months, and not suspecting that there is anything else. It's like living without knowing that fresh bread exists, only crackers. The shock of discovery is almost philosophical. Story 28. Vehicles entering a freeway, merging with traffic do not have the right of way, and yield signs are not merely suggestions. Story 29. Using a large touchscreen. At work, we have a 75-inch digital information wall, really just a big monitor. With tap to begin, I've watched people use their entire hand, knuckles, 2 fingers, 1 finger, but hold it there, etc., all while holding a smartphone. I would instruct, oh, it's like using your smartphone. They say, no, it's not. This one is bigger. Story 30. Led is the past tense of the verb to lead. Led, or lead, is the present tense of the verb to lead. Lead, lead, is a soft gray metal. Story 31. Pressing the test button on a smoke detector will silence it. I still see people fanning towels at them sometimes. Story 32. Air dryers for your hands in public toilets are just giant bacteria farms. That's why you never see them in hospitals. Washing your hands then using a blow dryer is redundant. Use paper to dry your hands or use sanitizer after using the dryer. Story 33. Many people can't picture faces in their heads, even of their loved ones. We don't fully remember faces but recognize them. I can tell you a few things about my mother's face, but I don't have a picture of it in my head. I am very fascinated by people who can do it, though. Answer, whoa, that's crazy. I can picture my mom right now, and I can see in my mind's eye her wrinkles, laugh lines, smile, the color lipstick she likes to wear, her glasses frames, hair color, and the grays she needs to touch up, and like everything. It's crazy to me, please can't see that. What do you see when you imagine people? Is it like a blurry image that won't focus? Story 34. Putting the toilet lid down every time before flushing. I was apparently white trash until 55. I never knew. Story 35. If your birthday is on a Monday, then the next year it will be on a Tuesday, then on a Wednesday, and so on, with the exception of leap years where it skips a day. Story 36. You don't have to put up with harmful behavior from your parents just because they are your family. When you're an adult, you can choose whether or not to have a relationship with them and decide what that looks like to you. They don't own you. I have so many friends, family, and coworkers who say, but they're my parents. We're family. I have to. No, you don't have to. You choose to. Story 37. How to read a map. General directions. News. Sometimes there's no Wi-Fi and apparently no common sense. Answer. I'll look through all the directions of my route before leaving, in case my phone glitches out or decides just stop working. Big problem with my old phone before I finally replaced it. And everyone thought I was out of my mind like, no, what happens if some psycho conspiracy theory event happens and there is no GPS? I'll be the only one who knows how to get places. Story 38. I'm always surprised by the number of people who think that ponies are baby horses rather than small horses. Story 39. That you could just remove all the zeros from a multiplication question, multiply all the non-zero numbers, then just add the zeros back afterwards. E.g., 234,000, 6,000 could be done as just 234 6 first, which is 1404. And then since there are 6 zeros in total from the original 2 numbers, just add 6 zeros to the back of 1404. Then you have 1404 0. Very easy. Story 40. That an egg is the largest single cell. It really messed with my partner's head for a few weeks when I mentioned that. Story 41. Telling the difference between wasps and bees. Could spot in an instant before I even started school. Only now, several decades later, did I find out the most PPL can't. Most scary was a guy working for pest control who was unable to spot the diff. Pretty critical, because you eliminate wasps, but always relocate bees. Story 42. You shouldn't pull in front of someone if it will cause them to have to slow down to avoid a crash when driving. Goes for intersections, lane changes, all of it. It should be common sense, and it's in the driving manual you study for the license, but so many people play that stupid game anyway. Story 43. Queer people existed in the olden times, and they exist in countries where it's banned, and they exist in ultra-conservative families. Story 44. Oil isn't made up of dead dinosaurs. The only reason I can see why people would believe this is that it takes a very long time, millions of years, to form, which makes people think of dinosaurs. Story 45. Cold temperatures do not actually give you a cold. Illness is transmitted by pathogens, not your failure to wear a coat. Story 46. That pronouns are words meant to function as substitutes for nouns in a conversation to streamline communication and are not exclusive to queer people. Story 47. Always get a second medical opinion. Doctors are awesome, but still human. I won't get into the amount of times that I, a non-doctor in the medical field with a useful specialty, corrected and changed their orders after calling them and going over their needs versus the test function. Example, arteries are different than veins and have different symptoms when they are compromised. Just get a second opinion. Story 48, literally every societal construct. But on a real note, how to behave in a retail store. We need to start making sure all signs are in all caps and bright cherry red. Story 49, the difference between a debit card and a credit card. Did some work in law school with bankruptcy law, and we ran a free clinic where people could ask about their finances and get advice about next steps. When I would point out the interest fees on the credit card statements, I would get blank stares. I didn't buy anything for $39. Yes, I know. That's the interest for the month. Followed up with, no, I didn't charge that. I only use this card at 7-Eleven. I know financial literacy is lacking in this country, but I swear, even if that improved, people will still choose Slurpees over an emergency fund and being debt-free. Story 50. That private label products, own store name products, are manufactured by well-known brand names companies. Usually they have the same quality, but a much lower price. Story 51. That the X in Xmas is the Greek letter chi, short for Christ. It still astounds me that lots of my fellow Americans don't know this. I consider it general knowledge. Story 52. RSVP means please respond. Not respond if you're coming, or respond if you are not coming. Respond whether you're coming or not. Answer, especially for a big event. I got 4 RSVPs back out of 70 for my wedding a few years ago. I had all the envelopes pre-stamped and filled out minus their return address. It was a huge waste of time since I had to hunt every person or family down by phone or social media to get my response in time for my vendors. At least shoot a text or something. And in addition to that, don't change your mind last second without some sort of heads up at the very least. You're making someone pay for extra food to make sure you can eat, only to have it partied too hard or charged despite the food not being served. It doesn't matter if it's a wedding or a birthday party. Show up when you say you will, or give a heads up so the host has a chance to adjust. Story 53. That eggs are not dairy. I have to avoid eating dairy, and reasonably often when I order something with no dairy at a restaurant, the waitstaff will tell me I can't have the dish because it has eggs in it. It's so weird. I guess because they are in the same section at the grocery store. Story 54. Who Anne Frank is. I worked in a bookstore and would sometimes mention it as a recommendation and realized that a surprising amount of people had never heard of her or her diary. Story 55. That carrots do nothing to help your eyesight. That was WW2 propaganda intended to cover for the efficiency of Allied night radar. That the right way to throw a Molotov is a sidearm throw. Throwing it overarm will just pour burning fuel over you. Story 56. If it's raining or snowing or getting dark out, put on your fudge headlights. Most modern cars have an auto feature. Turn it to that. The car is far smarter than you. And no, your daylight running lights are not your headlights or taillights. If it's raining really hard, don't drive with your hazards on. What's your next move? We have no fudge idea because your hazards are blinking. Story 57. Reading manuals and instructions. I've solved problems because I read the manuals and people are amazed. Story 58. Computer algorithms on social media sites. They are not designed to push content you want. It's not trying to figure out what you like. It is simply trying to favorably lead you to higher tier paid advertisement. The more this fact is concealed means the better the computer algorithm is working. Think of it like a breadcrumb trail. Each breadcrumb is a hint at the next video they want you to watch. The longer you follow the trail properly, the more you get ads that YouTube profits off of more. Example, you first sign up for YouTube and watch a video on how to do your hair. The algorithm weighs this as 70 push similar content, 30 push higher payout content. Say you click on one of these 30 higher payout content videos. Let's say it's a video of some guy drilling a hole in his toilet seat. Your algorithm will now weigh 30 hair, 70 toilet hole moron. It will keep mathematical weighting every video you search versus every video you actually watch, keeping content as close to what you like, but still leading you to content YouTube will actually make money off of. Simple example 2. You download TikTok. Videos on the letter C are profitable to TikTok. You're watching videos on the letter A, which are not. The algorithm will spam an overwhelming amount of letter C video directly after your letter A video to get you to bite. If you do bite, the computer algorithm will again use mathematical reasoning to keep directing you to letter C videos. Algorithms don't want you to be happy. They want you to watch what makes money. Every recommendation you receive is not out of concern for you, but the result of cold mathematical calculation. A bit of a creepy realization, isn't it? Story 59. If a toilet is overflowing, you can turn the knob on the pipe at the back to stop more water coming in. It will at least buy you time to solve your problem. Story 60. You have to turn your headlights on when it's raining, even if your state doesn't require it. Here's what your gray Nissan Sentra looks like in the rain. Story 61. Blonde roast coffee has more caffeine than dark roast coffee. Most people I've spoken to think it's the opposite, and it seems logically so. Dark roast is stronger in flavor, but the caffeine gets cooked out in dark roast. That's why breakfast blends are light roast or medium light roast. More caffeine in the morning. Story 62. When putting a battery in a device, like a flashlight or remote, you don't have to look for the or on signs. The flat end goes on the spring, always. Story 63. I'm an actuary. I've spent thousands of hours memorizing and mastering a lot of financial concepts in applied math. Most of the fairly complicated stuff is second nature to me. I forget that most people don't even know these things exist. Story 64. That the sun is a star. No, really, I've met tons of people who think it's a planet or something else. Story 65. I have a lot of surface-level general knowledge, and I usually forget that people don't know as much about the wide array of topics that I do. I have to constantly remind myself that most adults stop caring about a lot of the world after high school. Answer, I'm endlessly curious just for the sake of learning. And it's weird that some people just aren't. At all. At all. I'm 42, and I recently realized that I have family members who apparently just sort of decided to stop learning new things sometime in their 20s, I guess. They still go around saying shoot like, she had a blonde moment, but you know what they say? We only use 10 of our brains, like their software hasn't had even a basic upgrade since W was POTUS. Story 66. Dishwashers have a filter, and you do need to clean it out. Same with your clothes washing machine. Story 67. Cows need to be impregnated and give birth in order to produce milk. Male baby chicks are eliminated shortly after hatching because they don't produce eggs. Story 68. On the left-hand side of your steering wheel, at least on our cars in the U.S., there is this little stick, and if you push it down, it tells people you are going left or merging left, and if you hit it up, it tells people you are turning right or merging right. Crazy, no one knows about this. Story 69. That turning up down the thermostat on an HVAC doesn't make it cold or hot or any faster. It controls the temperature at which the unit stops blowing. Story 70. How elections work. Example, it's not illegal to move ballots from one location to another. Also, election laws vary by state, so just because it's not allowed in your state doesn't mean it's illegal in another. Story 71. That so many car brands are the same company. Toyota, Lexus, Chevy, Gem, Buick, Dodge, Ram, etc. I assume that's common knowledge, turns out it isn't. Story 72. People write a lot as one word, but it is actually two words. See here, a lot. In a sentence, there are a lot of people who don't know it is two words. Story 73. Always open public toilets with tissues paper. You don't know if the person before you didn't wash their hands and their unhygienic hands touch the door handle. Wash your hands every time you get to work, home, school, college. Wash your hands. Story 74. What former and latter mean? I can't tell you how often I use them and just get looked at quizzically. They're such useful words, and I thought everyone used them. Story 75. Feeling very strongly about an opinion, belief, or theory doesn't make it a fact. Also, being louder or resorting to insults in an argument doesn't make you right. Story 76. Fungi are rent plants. Neither are they animals. They're their very own thing. Edit to add, they are actually closer related to animals than to plants. They're hardly under-researched and very, very cool. Story 77. Dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is a learning disability that makes it hard to understand, learn, and do general math. I have always struggled with basic math. It takes me longer than it should, and I need paper and pencil and counting on fingers for calculations most people can do mentally in a nanosecond. I don't love it when someone hears this and immediately asks me to do mental calculations to prove my ineptitude. Really? You can't do percents? What's 32 of 75? What part of I can't mentally calculate percents didn't you understand? Story 78. When I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, I felt I already knew all the concepts and was already practicing them. I don't understand why people need to be told not to criticize others and instead to praise and be nicer to people. It just feels like common sense to me. But to most people, they don't already know that people will dislike you and not want to be around you if you criticize them. Answer, I teach leadership management as a side gig, and in my experience, it's slightly more nuanced by that. They know they need to be nice to people, but they aren't recognizing how they aren't nice, or they are justifying negative behaviors. I have to tell them they are wrong. I am their manager. They were mean to me. I'm just direct, not rude. Also, that book came out in the 30s when authoritarian leadership styles were more in vogue. I would argue it was arguing for democratic leadership before that was really a thing. It remains relevant, in my opinion, because it encourages intentionality. If I, or a 365 review, points out anyone's lack of nice behaviors they know they should be doing, they get very defensive and shut down. So I have them read HTWFIP and get them focusing on very basic nice behaviors and performing it with intention. Now their behavior is becoming more intentional and shifting towards the positive trends we are seeking. A larger issue is instinctual behavior versus intentional behavior. And HTWFAIP isn't rocket science, but instead forcing someone to start being more intentional versus instinctual. Don't criticize, praise. For some, this is a brilliant revelation from a book, while for others, it is natural behavior. It is interesting that the simplest human kindness sometimes requires an entire book and titanic efforts to become a method. Story 79. Even numbered interstates in the U.S. go east to west, while odd-numbered go north to south. For example, I-90 goes from Seattle to Boston, while I-95 goes from Maine to Florida. Story 80. Multi-level marketing companies are unethical. It's widely reported that 99 of MLM sellers lose money. These companies prey on vulnerable and uneducated people, primarily women. These may be stay-at-home moms or people with chronic illness who are just trying to support their families. MLMs encourage sellers to leverage their personal relationships to support their sales and encourage sellers to cut ties and alienate themselves from those who are not supportive. Lastly, MLM distributors are not business owners or boss babes. Business owners have control product development and production, as well as company marketing strategies and branding. MLM's distributors have zero control over these business decisions. Overall, MLMs are scummy businesses with shady business goals and practices and should be avoided at all costs. Story 81. What presidents are on the different denominations of cash? I remember having a conversation at an old job with someone about money, and somehow it came up about a president. I asked if they knew who was on the 5, and they didn't. Then I asked about the 20, and they didn't know either. I thought that was so strange. So I went and asked some other people at work the same questions. Most of the people I asked did not know the answers. This was about 15 years ago when everyone always used cash. It's just one of those things I thought everyone knew. Story 82. If you're the last person to see someone alive and the first person to find them dead, the police talk to you for a long, long time. Story 83. If you were to travel straight up in a rocket ship without going sideways at all, you would fall straight back down. Even if you went as high as the space station, there isn't zero gravity up there. The reason satellites in the space station stay up is that they are traveling sideways very quickly. They are constantly falling downwards, but they go sideways so fast that they keep missing the Earth, so they go round and round. Story 84. That studies can have small sample sizes relative to the entire population and still produce statistically significant results. Story 85. There's nothing wrong with being rude to rude people. There's nothing wrong with being intolerant of intolerant people? Being offended by something doesn't make you correct. Answer: there's nothing wrong with being intolerant of intolerant people. Exactly. There's a name for this, the paradox of tolerance. You can't really be tolerant of others if you're also being tolerant of their bigotry toward others. You just defeat the purpose and make yourself look disingenuous. I can't count how many times I've had to explain this to people who thought then were being righteous by being tolerant of anything and everything. Sorry, Nazis don't deserve respect. Story 86. Bikes should be ridden in the street and follow traffic rules. Bikes ridden by older teenagers or adults do not belong on the sidewalk. Story 87. I don't think it's most people, at least I hope, but I tutored biology at a community college, and the first chapter was very basic math. It was about percentages, like how to calculate them and how to convert between percentages and decimals. I was already surprised that so many people didn't understand this at 18, but what really blew my mind was a complete lack of basic background knowledge that I just assumed every adult had. For example, some math problems would be like, Bob works 76 days a year. What percentage of the year does Bob work? Multiple people didn't know how many days are in a year, but it got even worse. Like, some people didn't know how many hours in a day, how many seconds in a minute, how many minutes in an hour, etc. Just general knowledge like that blew my mind and completely changed my entire approach to teaching. Story 88. How girls pee, aka how many holes do girls have? Not sure how to say that without being crude, but it's something I've discussed with a few people, and they had no clue TBH1 was my 60-year-old mom. Story 89. You don't get taxed more when your income moves up a tax bracket. Only the income amount that is in the higher tax bracket is taxed at that percent. The rest of your income is taxed the same as it was. People literally turn down raises because they don't want to go up a tax bracket and pay more tax. It doesn't work like that. Story 90. Water flows downhill. 50 states in the USA. Stop signs are not merely suggestions. Do not put your finger in the light socket. It has electricity. I don't see electricity. Put your finger in it. Story 91. When you're grocery shopping, maneuver through the aisles like you would on roads. If you're coming out of an aisle to a T-stop main aisle, look both ways before pulling out. The main aisle is where people are generally walking straight. By immediately pulling from an aisle into the main alley, you're going to hit someone or force people around you to come to a complete halt. I'm sick of always hearing they should put traffic lights up in these aisles. Sir, we all went to driver's ed, as we all should know what to do when at an intersection with no lights. Check for clearance before merging. Story 92. Insulin lowers blood sugar. So if a diabetic faints from low blood sugar, dosing them like it's an EpiPen might just eliminate them. Apparently people don't know that, though I had misconceptions about diabetics into my teen years as well. I thought they couldn't eat sugar at all and was very confused when an acquaintant diabetic always carried tiny sugary candy with him for emergencies. Story 93. People don't realize how much a billion is. Let's say if you waited for a drink at a restaurant and you waited 1 million seconds, it would take you 12 days. If you waited 1 billion seconds, it would take you 31 years and 8 months. This means that you can't be a billionaire and gain the money in an ethical way. It's just not possible. Story 94. Carbon monoxide detectors are not required at Airbnbs. Several people have died. Bring your own when you travel. Story 95. The sheer number of times the Bible contradicts itself. Most people never read the actual book. They listen to a pastor who has the flip randomly to make a point. If you compare the stories that are shared across books, then you'll see lots of difference in dates, people, events, etc. Story 96. In America, when you see yellow and black slanted signs on the road, the stripes are pointing down to where the road is in case of dark or snowy conditions. Story 97. That diamonds aren't rare and the diamonds industry is basically a scam, which also reinforced the idea that a wedding has to be an incredibly expensive extravagance. So many people believe that if a partner isn't spending a huge chunk of cash on a ring, they don't really love you. Wild. Story 98. How marginal tax rates work. Pushing into a higher bracket only increases the tax rate for the dollars in that bracket, not the ones below it. Story 99. Being patient and considerate while driving won't drastically affect your journey time, and you will be in a much better mood. Story 100. I don't know if it's most people or even most Americans, but I've recently learned that a not insignificant portion of the voting age population in the United States thinks if you're a registered Democrat, you are only allowed to vote for Democratic candidates and Republicans for Republicans. I'm not talking about primaries. I'm talking about in the general election. Actually shocking. Story 101. Chinese atrocities, and that Mao has been responsible for more civilian deaths than any other person in recorded history. Story 102. The fact that yay, as in yay or nay, is pronounced like yay, but not spelled like it. When someone uses yay for yeah, I want to reply with something like, forsooth, verily thou sayest? Story 103. How to file your taxes or basic accounting skills, i.e. balance sheets, ledgers, GAAP principles, cost-based versus accrual. Story 104. Sunrise is in the east, sunsets in the west. You cannot go to California, look out at the ocean, and watch the sunrise over the water unless you book your vacation at an inlet. This is why you can navigate by both the stars and the sun during daylight. I've seen a few lost hikers spend first day of being lost tracking the sun and seeing if someone would find them. Then on day 2, using the sun path from the day before to navigate themselves down the mountain back to the city. Story 105. Boiling water and filtering with Brita serve different functions. Boiling eliminates germs while Brita removes chemicals like lead and chlorine. If you have bad water, don't think you can just boil it instead of filtering it. Figure out why it is bad first. Story 106. I don't know about most people, but I was shocked that my SO didn't know how to close Tupperware lids. I had bought a set last year, and after a couple weeks, he whined at me about how they were useless and a waste of money because they didn't close very well easily. I asked if he was pushing all the way down on the little circle, and he asked what the hell I was talking about. I guess no one ever told him that you just push down in the middle instead of going around the rim. Story 107. In my personal circle of friends, evolution, I just assumed everyone knew this. I mean, we all went to the same high school. It turns out that religiosity made a bigger impact on them than I realized. Story 108. Money you are paid for a job is spelt pronounced remuneration, not remuneration. I am constantly shocked by how many people get this wrong and have given up on correcting others. Story 109. That the United States Congress has 2 houses, Senate and House, and that Congress, not the president, is the ones in control of the budget. Story 110. The number of people who use your when they should be using your. That and people using to when it should be to. Story 111. Telling a person they are blessed with a talent or naturally gifted can be extremely annoying. Most people, if not all, who are skilled at something are skilled because they put in a lot of time and effort. Story 112. That the lights on your car are not just so you see better, but so others can see you as well. Just because you can see fine at dusk doesn't mean you don't need your lights. Story 130. I thought everyone knew if you were at the beach and the water suddenly disappeared, you don't go down to look at the fish, you run like heck for high ground. After the 2004 tsunami, I was genuinely shocked at the number of people who didn't realize the tide rapidly receding was a precursor to a tsunami. Story 114. That our solar system is just a bunch of planets spinning around a stationary star. Nah, that star's flying. We flying around it, and the entire galaxy is flying. We spin around the sun at 67 km/h. Our solar system moves at 448 km/h, and our galaxy is moving at 1.3 mm/s. Story 115. Declawing a cat is effectively removing their fingertips. Bonus fact, the substances they use to put an animal to sleep, stop their hearts, is the same one they use to make them go unconscious, but at a higher dose. Story 116. Statue is a thing pigeons or people might find in a park. Statute is a law. Lose means to not win or not be able to find. Loose is the opposite of tight. Espresso means pressed coffee. Espresso is a pen made by Pentel. Then means after that. Then compares one thing to another. I'd rather have a headache than the flu. Means one thing. I'd rather have a headache than the flu. Means you want to have both. Story 117. Donald Trump is a massive piece of shoot. Even before he became president, I thought everyone just understood that he would fudge anyone he dealt with. Story 118. That most flour is made from wheat. I have celiac disease and have to be gluten-free. So why can't I have that cake, cookie, piece of pizza, ECT? Because it has wheat in it. Really? It does. I thought it was made from flour. Permanent red spot on forehead just got darker. SMH. Story 119. There are companies that will come out to clean up bloody accident in passing scenes. Yes, it costs money, but it's worth it to not have to deal with that on top of the trauma and loss. No one should have to clean up the remains of a loved one. Story 120. Keyboard shortcuts. ITK, if it's because I work with people who didn't have computer classes in grade school or what. QTRLC is copy. Qtrl-V is paste. There are a lot more, but these are the ones I use daily. Oh, and Qtrl-Shift-N, when in an internet browser on a computer, will open a private browser. All this really does is it doesn't save cookies or passwords, though. So don't use it to look up weird stuff at work. It can still monitor it. Story 121. How to parallel park. The trick was stopping at half the length of the car in front before turning your wheel. Crazy how many people will just drive away and look for another spot. Story 122. General respect of others' belongings. It baffles me the amount of people that think dinging a car door isn't a big deal. Story 123. A baby deer lying there all alone is doing fine. Mom is out taking a break and will be back later. I worked at a zoo once and actually had people come up saying they had the fawn in the car and was wondering if we could rehabilitate it. Also, it's the male peafowl that display their plumage. The females aren't as pretty. Most animal facts in general, though. I was kind of floored when I realized I was the odd person out and loved to watch Animal Planet. Story 124. Anything computer-related. You think a generation growing up with technology would be comfortable with it, but surprisingly, too many people I talk with don't even know how to open Task Manager or know which ports look like which. Story 125. Hens and rooster are all chickens. The amount of people I've met that think a rooster is not a chicken is astounding. Story 126. Working too much and getting promoted for giving 120% is not a sustainable work strategy. Burnout is real. Moving up the ladder by cleaning up everyone's chute or licking everyone's jerk will only get you so far. You, like everyone else, is just a number for any company you work for. Story 127. That dislike is destroying our planet. Too much spread of dislike through politicians, to preachers, to right-wing talk shows. Story 128. In English, only proper nouns are capitalized. It's aggravating how often I see people, apparently, capitalizing the important words in a sentence. Did they not teach you in middle school not to do this? Story 129. That all plants have to flower to reproduce if they don't make spores or cones. It boggles my mind seeing people make plant posts over in or what's this plant or Rouse plants and are simply shocked because I didn't think this plant flowered. Like, this is basic biology. Story 130. That the magpie song goes up to 10 not 7, 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told, 8 for a wish, 9 for a kiss, 10 for a day of joyful bliss. Story 131. Apparently, most people don't know Native American history. It goes to the first Thanksgiving, to the Trail of Tears, then to maybe Wounded Knee, and that's it. Story 132. Tax rates are marginal. They only apply to the income within the band. Moving to a higher marginal rate does not magically change the rate you pay on the income you had before. It might not be effort effective to do the work to get paid in a higher tax band, but being in a higher tax band doesn't result in you have less money. Disclaimer, marginal benefits like unemployment don't always work this way, and that is a terrible, bad, no good thing. Story 133. Not putting dish soap for sink washing in the dishwasher. Over the past 20 years, I've had 2 different boyfriends and a roommate do it, and then a friend who did it just a couple years ago. She's 38. Is it really not common knowledge, or do I just know some silly people? Story 134. Just zero phone etiquette these days. I call people, and they won't even say hello when answering, so I call and get silence. I get robocallers kind of fudge it by trying to gauge if numbers connect to a real person for telemarketing. And shoot, but Jesus, just add yourself to the do not call list. Going through 30 years of life with one phone cadence and having people suddenly not follow it within the last 5 years is so bizarre and awkward. Just say hello or don't answer IDC. Get repod. Story 135. So many. The top of the list is don't dive into water you don't see the bottom. You'll break your neck. Story 136. That Judaism, Islam, and Christianity are Abrahamic religions with a lot more tying them together than separating them. Story 137. HR is not on your side and not there to protect you and your interests. Their decisions can align with individuals, but only if they are also in the best interest of the company. Story 138. For those who enjoy comedy, the TV show Tipsy History is hilarious, while also being 100 historically correct. It was aired on Comedy Central and has 5 seasons and features many modern comedians getting shoot-faced while explaining significant moments in history. Has funny little animations to show the stories to give some funny, dramatic, memorable visuals. Def recommended the show to all comedy fans. It taught me a lot and gave me some major laughs. Story 139. The customer is always right is referring to their spending patterns. A shop should order more of a popular item. It does not mean that the customer has the right to harmful behavior staff for any reason. Also, frontline customer-facing staff in almost every industry do not have any say about anything and aren't paid enough to care. Story 140. Just because you're driving the speed limit doesn't mean you can chill in the left lane. The left lane is for passing. Chill in the right lane. I think it's technically illegal to be the slow driver in the left lane, like it is in Europe, but it's not enforced in the US, and it really needs to be. Story 141. While driving, if you are not sure what town you are in, take a look at telephone poles you pass. There is a small rectangular metal plate at eye level. The plate usually has about 3 letters at the end. Most of the time, the letters are initials for the town the pole is in. This has been helpful more times than I can count. Story 142. The terms concrete and cement are not synonymous. Concrete is a mix that contains cement as the binding agent. Story 143. It depends on where you are. I had no idea before moving to the desert of the following things. When you eliminate a rattlesnake, chop off its head and put it in a glass jar. Even a severed head will continue to try to bite for an hour or longer. If it's in a glass jar, no one can get to it, and it can't get to anyone. If you throw it in the trash or bury it, your dogs might get to it and get snake bit. Scorpions are eliminated immediately by rubbing adult beverage. If you see a scorp, grab it up with tongs or long tweezers and drop it into a jar with an inch or so of rubbing adult beverage. Tarantulas are completely harmless in spite of being utterly terrifying due to their size. TLDR. If you move to the desert, buy machetes, glass jars, and isopropyl adult beverage. Story 144. When there is a lane closure on the highway, the lane that is ending is to be used until the merge, at which point a zipper merge should occur in an alternating fashion. Not move over 2 miles early and refuse to let others in at the merge. Story 145. That the left lane on the highway is used for overpassing. A lot of people think you can stay on it if you drive at one speed under what cops tolerate, or whatever the F they have in mind. Story 146. That a shitload of conservative Americans don't know how extremely basic processes of our govt and elections work. Story 147. That it's been public knowledge that Trump is a white supremacist since the 80s. It still floors me that people act like this is something the left-wing media made up in 2016. Story 148. Don't take fever reducer unless it's over like 101, Otherwise, you're just suppressing symptoms and it'll keep coming back. Suck it up. Take a 1-2 days off to sleep. No fever reducer. Recently talked to someone who took ibuprofen every day BC. Their fever kept coming back. I'm like, yeah? Obviously, your fever is there for a reason. Let it do its work. It'll be over faster, Loyal. Story 149. That Trump is a con artist. I grew up in New York, and it was well known he wouldn't pay his bills, stiff his contractors, bully smaller companies with lawsuits, etc. It absolutely amazes me that people actually want him to be president. Story 150. Hobby Lobby funded Al-Qaeda and ISIS by purchasing plundered artifacts for the Creation Museum. The GovT caught on and forced them to pay a $3 million fine, as well as forfeiting the artifacts. Also, apparently not as many people know that the government wasn't buddy-buddy WMLK. My GF was pretty surprised to find out the FBI tried to blackmail him into tragic end. The whole COINTELPRO thing, as well as the J. Edgar Hoover era of the FBI, needs to be covered way more in schools. The government is not your friend, and like a living organism, its main purpose is to ensure its own survival. Sometimes that involves serving the electorate, and other times it's infiltrating leftist movements and imploding them. Sorry, I accidentally let out my inner Dale Gribble towards the end there. Story 151. Do not stick your hand in a dog's face to let them smell you, especially if leashed. Their noses are excellent, and they can already smell you. Dogs' fight or flight is limited on leash, so all they really have is fight. It's a great way to get bit if you do it to the wrong dog. When greeting a dog, turn to the side and avoid eye contact and let them smell you and get used to you. Pet their shoulders, avoiding going over the head. If you want to pet them, right till you ask the owner. Some people say to kneel down, but personally I would only do that if I was out of lunging distance. BC kneeling down can also lead to a face bite if the dog is spooked. Story 152. I was playing this team quiz game at work. There were maybe 40 people playing. This question came up. Who's the only U.S. president not to be elected to office? I thought. Everyone knows it's Gerald Ford, but shockingly, no one else knew. So I got a point for my team. Next, a question about The Simpsons was asked. This time I was the only one in the room that didn't know the answer. Story 153. Unless you already come from money, you have to invest to even have a chance and try to avoid consumer debt as much as possible. Story 154. If there is a fire alarm in a building and you evacuate, don't stand right in front of the building while waiting for it to be checked. Story 155. Proactive thinking. My family is allergic to the concept. I am constantly stressed TF out. The glass of liquid is too close to the edge. Move in further in and away from your elbow. It's going to get snowy and wet. Keep a coat in your car and give extra time to commute clean off car. The necessary thing is almost gone empty. I should make sure to replace it now before I run out entirely. I'm going to be walking a lot today. I should wear comfortable shoes. Seriously, people can't even think ahead on proper footwear. Don't wait until the problem has already happened. In the words of Scar, Lion King, be prepared. Story 156. Mormon JW leadership sends young people door to door locally because they know they'll get shouted down and teased and threatened and have theory religion scrutinized. Then the teens come home to the temple or hall and they have a big pity party. AW, see how mean they are, everyone. If so full of anger and dislike, come here, baby. The church loves you and wants what's best. Story 157. That if an oncoming car or a car following you flashes their lights at night, it's probably because your lights are not on. Story 158. Tax brackets. I had an extremely intelligent boss turn down a raise because he thought it would push him into the next bracket and lose him money. When I explained how it actually worked, I think it broke him a little inside. Story 159. Something I have noticed in the last 10 years or so. For my childhood and early adulthood, there was a common cultural canon stretching back decades or even centuries that everyone just sort of got. Certainly among the middle class, there were things you could refer to, comparisons you could make, things you could allude to that everyone just got. Everyone growing up was exposed to the same literature. Everyone read Shakespeare, for example. So if someone sardonically said something like, to be or not to be, that is the question. Everyone in the room knew what was being referred to and that the speaker did not just start spouting random nonsense. Everyone had read Huck Finn, and so when someone decided to go against the grain and said, all right then, it'll go to hell, nobody thought they were predicting their own future damnation. Everyone had read the Bible, so when someone said they were casting pearls before swine, nobody was confused at what that meant. Nowadays, it's more than likely a listener is not even familiar with the literal meaning of the word swine in the first place. Come to find out, young people today, and for some time, don't read books in school anymore. They just read short stories or single passages from larger works or something to do with standardized tests and such. Seems a shame to have lost that common thread in our culture. There used to be a common cultural ground. Shakespeare, the Bible, Twain. Now it's gone. We live in a world where a reference to Hamlet may not be understood, but everyone knows the latest meme from TikTok. It's neither good nor bad, it's just very, very lonely sometimes. Story 160. Foods taste different to different people. Some people taste tofu as disgustingly beany. Some people taste Brussels sprouts as bitter, yes, the modern ones. And of course, some people taste cilantro as soapy. It's not that other people like that gross flavor. It's often that you don't taste it. Story 161. HR are not your friend. HR are there to protect the employer. If you're ever in a meeting with management and HR are involved, look at where they sit. They're next to management and not next to you. Be careful. Story 162. That most lactose intolerant people can have basically any cheese. While technically it contains some lactose, it's very, very small to none amounts. Story 163. It took Reddit for me to realize that butter can be left out on the counter and still be good for a long while. No more trying to spread cold, hard butter. Story 164. Shopping at the thrift store doesn't take away resources from those in need. The profits from the sales at thrift stores helps those in need. I had people acting like I was doing something unethical by shopping at the thrift store. Story 165. How to find north, south, east, west using the path of the sun. Went camping with a friend and her friend group. Someone gave us directions and said to use the trail northeast of where we were. As we left, the gals were discussing how the hell were we supposed to know which direction northeast was. I pointed the direction, and they were flabbergasted that I knew. I pointed out that we all watched the sunset the night before and they didn't understand, LOL. Story 166. I was with a coworker trying to find an address, and I mentioned that it couldn't be on the right side of the street because the address was an odd number, and he said, "Why is that?" And I said, streets generally in the U.S. had odd numbers on one side and even numbers on the other. Story 167. The hash cross cut in the road at intersections has a sensor for the lights under it. If you're not above it, it won't detect your car and change the light settings. Story 168. Basic science. No, really, like elementary stuff like heat rises and boiling points and stuff like that. I grew up in the suburbs with a great school system and learned a lot growing up. I always thought, since this is elementary school, most people should know it, right? Wrong. When I got a job at a big warehouse in LA, most of the employees were foreign immigrants too, with little to no education. I was the minority graduating high school. There was this one girl that worked directly under me, so I had to coach her a lot. I forgot the exact reason, but I had to show her that here rises. I first explained it to her, but it had been the first time she heard that. She did not believe me. I lit a lighter and showed how the flame goes up. She did not believe me still, and said it's cause the gas is pointing up. So I turned the lighter to the side, showing even if gas goes to the side, the rest of the flame goes up. She still didn't believe me and said when she stands next to a campfire, the heat is hot next to it and goes sideways. I gave up and still think to this day that she does not believe me. Heat rises. It would seem that what could be simpler? But when you encounter a complete lack of understanding of such basics, you realize how fragile and subjective our view of the world is. We live in different realities, pieced together from different school experiences. Story 169. Pharmacies don't set the price of your medications if you have insurance. Each insurance sets the copay for your medications based on their contract with that pharmacy chain. They're not trying to rip you off. That's just what your insurance has told them the price is, and they can't change that. Also, your pharmacy likely loses money on almost all your prescriptions they fill, but especially on all brands like insulins, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Ozempic, Jardiance, etc. Yes, even with the ridiculous copays, they're losing money because of fees they have to pay to shady PBM, pharmacy benefit manager, companies. Source, I've been a pharmacy tech for 3 years. Story 170. That people just don't know basic types of trees. Elm, oaks, ash, cedar, maples, hackberry, mulberry, ginkgo, redbud, walnut, sycamore, etc. Story 171. Major interstate routes have 1 or 2 digits. Routes with odd numbers run north and south. Routes with even numbers run east and west. Story 172. When setting a table, make your left hand into a B with your index finger and thumb. That's for where the bread goes, on the left. Make your right index finger and thumb into a D, and that's for drink, on the right. Also, fork has 4 letters, and left has 4 letters. Spoon and knife have 5 letters, and right has 5 letters. Story 173. That it's I couldn't care less, not I could care less. I could care less means you actually care enough to have the ability and reserves to actually care less. Story 174. The genocide of indigenous people in the United States and the fact that they are still alive and present. The fact that many of us are residing on occupied land. Story 175. Buying a dog or cat from a pet store is not being a savior. Another animal from a mill is going to be there to replace it because you fed into the demand for these animals by buying it. Story 176. An easy way to remember the nautical terms for right and left, starboard and port, is to remember left port. Both words contain 4 letters and end with T. Even my ex-husband, who was in the Navy, didn't realize this until I pointed it out to him. Story 177. That as your brain fully developed, you realize that gate and religion were invented and fictionalized to manipulate people thousands of years ago, just like Santa Claus to children, to get them to behave a certain way. Story 178. The number of adults, men and women, who don't realize women have 3 holes and that babies are in fact not birthed out of the urethra. Story 179. Using your turn signal doesn't give you the right of way. Backstory. I used to work as a liability adjuster for personal auto claims. I don't judge you for being liable for an accident. That's why we have insurance, but please don't argue with me over traffic laws. I heard some silly excuses for not being at fault. One guy insisted his mom said he wasn't at fault, so it should apply here. But many times when people are changing lanes or making a left turn in front of someone else, and the person they are turning in front of has the right of way, they will insist that because they use their turn signal first, the other vehicle should have seen them and yielded to them and not the other way around. I once spent 30 minutes on the phone with someone who insisted that because she had used her turn signal, a fact my driver and a third vehicle disputed, by the way, before she changed lanes, it didn't matter that she hit our driver because I used my turn signal before changing lanes, so I had right-of-way here. People, using your turn signal doesn't give you the right-of-way. You still have to check for vehicles traveling with the right-of-way, and you still have to yield. P.S. That job was why I bought a dash cam.